Hi everyone, my name is Natalie DC. Welcome back to my channel. I am a reader, writer, and artist here to talk about books with you, and art, and maybe a little bit of writing. In today's video, I will be doing a wrap-up of all 11 blue books that I read in the month of May. There are quite a few books to get through, so without further ado, let's get started. The first blue book that I read in the month of May is Self-Portrait as Several Clusters of Stars by Nat Raum. This is my first collection of writing that I've read by Nat Raum. I've followed them on Instagram for quite a while and I've always loved what they put out on social media, so I've wanted to get my hands on one of their collections for quite a while, and this collection is actually a collection of prose. It was published by Bottle Cap Press, my chapbook publisher. So obviously I had to get my hands on it and read it first, and I actually have it here with me. This is the cover. It is stunning, and again, it was published by Bottle Cap Press, so definitely support your indie publishers and writers. But yes, this is, like I said, a collection of, I'd say mostly prose. It is sort of a collection of small prose vignettes that follows the author's birth chart. It explores identity, personality, mental health from the structure of this zodiac chart. It's a very unique structure, as you can see just by looking at the table of contents. There we go, as it focuses. It has the zodiac star chart with the names of the each prose vignette. So a very unique premise for a very unique little book. It draws inspiration from essayettes of Ross Gay and Mary Ruffle. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. And yeah, it's a very wonderful collection. I had a great time reading this. I was thoroughly captivated by Nat Raum's use of language and the depth of reflection that is put into each of these little essays. Based on the beautiful cover and what I've seen of Nat Raum's writing through social media, I was expecting a little bit more from this collection. There were some meandering essayettes that I didn't really care for, as well as some typos that I noticed, which kind of threw me off and kind of took me out of the reading experience. So because of that, I gave this collection 3.75 stars. I still really enjoyed it. It was still a solid first read of Nat Raum's writing. We're not done talking about them quite yet, but yes, if you're interested in this premise for this prose collection, I would highly recommend checking this out. I'll have a link to purchase the collection down in the description box below. Switching away from small collections into a much larger anticipated read, the next blue book that I read in the month of May is Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. Now, this is a book that I've been wanting to check out for quite a while. It made its rounds on booktube and bookstagram. This book follows 5 Chinese American college students who team up to take back the Chinese art that has been stolen from China throughout its history of existence by different museums around the Western world. That is the very watered down version. The main character is Will Chen. He is kind of the mastermind of this entire plan. He's the character that we see the POV of first. We do get POVs from all of the characters. Will Chen, his sister Irene Chen, his best friend Daniel Lang, Lily Wu, and Alex Huang. So 5 Chinese American college students from around the US, they team up. They're very intriguing. It talks about themes of privilege versus power, colonizer versus colonized, and the past versus the future, all the while these characters kind of deal with their own expectations of themselves and their family's expectations of themselves, and how that ties into this mastermind like heist that they're trying to pull off. Needless to say, this was a very intriguing premise, hence why I wanted to read this book so badly, and I did, and I have some thoughts. While I enjoyed this unique premise, I felt that the book itself was too ambitious for its own good. I didn't mention this, but this is a debut novel, and it kind of shows. Let me explain. When I talk about ambition, I mean all of the themes wrapped together, as well as these 5 main characters. It's a lot to juggle, plus this very overarching plot of them trying to steal Chinese art back from these 5 museums around the world. This is a lot to put together into 400 or less pages, and while I think the author did a decent job, felt that there were some areas that were lacking. For example, I did find myself enjoying the quiet moments between each of the characters as they interact with one another and compare their experiences of being Chinese American. I found myself enjoying those moments more than the actual high tension moments of them actually stealing the art from the museums, because during those scenes, the language is very vague and hard to follow, and it's almost as if this was the first time the author was writing scenes like this. It didn't make any sense, and it was very hard to follow as a reader. But that's just my opinion. With such a huge, monumental plot, you'd think this book would be more action heavy and more fast paced, but it's actually very slow paced, and there are a lot of moments that are very lulled, and it's just filled with the characters planning amongst themselves for these heists. My main qualm with this book, and the reason why I gave it 3.75 stars instead of 4 stars or 4.25 stars, is because of the writing. Writing is very beautiful. I really liked the flowery prose that was sprinkled throughout each of these characters' perspectives, but because these characters are supposed to be very different from one another, they have different experiences. They're all college students and Chinese American and dealing with diaspora, but they're supposed to be different. And each of the perspectives pretty much had the same writing style, almost as if you just took out the name from the top of each chapter and the third person's perspective, obviously, you would not be able to tell what character was in what perspective, and that's not really a good sign. Oftentimes the characters' voices blended together and it was hard to differentiate the characters from one another, and that's not really a good sign for a story that hinges on these 5 main characters. Another qualm I have with the writing is its repetitiveness. There are a lot of phrases that the author relies on throughout this story. For example, there will be a lot of sentences. You will not be able to go 5 pages without seeing a sentence like, it goes like this, and then it lists out. I don't really know how to make an example. I don't have the book in front of me, but there are a lot of phrases where it's just like, it goes like this, it was this, like, this is how the weekend went, kind of listing out what happened in like short sentence fragments, and that's how we get kind of that backstory to what's going on in the story, which isn't like a bad technique by all means, but when you have this every other page or so, it gets pretty noticeable and pretty exhausting to read. And if you read the book, you might know what I'm talking about. It's a bit hard to explain. But yeah, for those reasons, I did again give this book 3.75 stars. Once again, I did really enjoy this book for what it was trying to achieve, but like I put in my Goodreads review, I felt it maybe would have been better and more fleshed out for each of the characters if this was a series of books and each book was dedicated to each. There's 5 main characters and there's 5 heists. I think it would have been cool if this was a 5-book series and each book was dedicated to, you know, heist 1 is in Will Chen's perspective, heist 2 is in Irene Chen's perspective. That way we would have gotten more fleshed out characters. We could have focused on one heist and one character, and it wouldn't have all just been mashed together into this 400-page novel. But this book is being turned into a Netflix adaptation, so I may or may not like the TV show more. We will see. That's just my opinions on the book itself. The next blue book that I read in the month of May is The Weeds by Katy Simpson Smith. I discovered this book through Bookstagram, both because of its intriguing premise and its beautiful blue cover. This book follows 2 women, one living in 2018 working under a jackass advisor. She's cataloging plants in Rome's Colosseum ruins, and the other woman, she lives in 1854 and she's mourning the loss of her lover as she prepares for an unwanted marriage. So we have dual timelines and dual POVs in this book, so already kind of a lot going on. Plus, this book is kind of divvied up into sections where each section is titled after a different plant and that specific woman's connection to that plant. So lots of plant allegories, nature motifs throughout this book, hence the title, The Weeds. Despite how much is going on, I really enjoyed and was enraptured by this book. It has lovely prose, very fascinating facts about plants, all interspersed between these 2 characters' tragic lives that overall sweeps the reader under a dark, gloomy spell. My only qualms with this book, the confusing POV switches. This book, I believe, is in first person throughout, and each section / chapter is titled after a plant, so there's no marker at the top of each section that delineates which is in which woman's perspective. I wish there was a marker at the top of each section delineating which section was in which woman's perspective, because it took me about I'd say halfway through the book before I kind of got comfortable with the POV switches, and while it is alternating, it does get confusing at times. There's also a third perspective of a male ghost, which I didn't really see too much of a point to his POV until like the very end. So I could have done without his POV, honestly, and we could have focused more on the two women. Yeah, that's just my opinion. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I actually gave it 4.5 stars. If it weren't for those like confusing POV switches, this would have been a perfect 5 stars because I swallowed this book up. Like I ate it up. I did not really expect to love it as much as I did. Yeah, it was a very pleasant surprise. So I would highly recommend it if this premise intrigues you and you want to read about women struggling and plants. If that's your thing, definitely check this book out. The next blue book that I read in the month of May is The Boy with a Bird in His Chest by Lund. This is actually a book that I've been meaning to check out for quite a while, and by quite a while I mean since last year when I was doing this Rainbow Reading Challenge. Yep, I almost reviewed this book for last year, but I was unable to get to it. But finally, I read this book and I really enjoyed it. This book, as the title suggests, is about a boy named Owen Tanner who was born with a bird living inside of his chest. And basically, spoilers, not spoilers, this is an allegory for the boy being queer, and this book follows him kind of living in hiding from the army of acronyms, as his mother calls the doctors and police and other figures of authority in the world. He's basically living in hiding from these people as he doesn't want to be taken away from his mother. So his mother hides him away. He goes to live with his uncle and his cousin in the rural countryside, and there he learns to kind of open up and be proud of who he is. So very much this bird in his chest is an allegory for him being queer and coming out in a bigoted landscape, which I really enjoyed. Felt it was a very unique way of telling this very common story that we see in YA. I really adored Owen's character. It's not often that I relate so hard to a male character in YA. Yeah, I just related to him so much and I want to be his friend so bad. So yeah, I really loved his character and I really enjoyed the author's writing style as well. I felt it was that nice mix of like the personality of Owen, so very sarcastic and witty, but also very gentle and reflective with Owen's surroundings, if that makes sense. I also really enjoyed the found family aspect of this novel. I am a sucker for found families, so yeah, definitely enjoyed that part of this novel as well. And the book is split up into 4 parts, I believe, each part delineating a different section of Owen's childhood / adolescence. So the beginning part is kind of describing the backstory of how Owen ended up living with his uncle and cousin, and then the majority of the novel is him living with them and then discovering who he is and kind of becoming proud of himself, which I kind of enjoyed those neat little sections. Yeah, overall I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4.25 stars. What stopped me from rating it higher was the ending. I felt it was a bit too convenient and wrapped up in a nice little bow. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but let's just say there's a lot of problems at the end and they're solved in a very convenient way, and a lot of characters that act wrongly towards Owen, they're kind of just forgiven and forgotten, if that makes sense. So yeah, didn't really care for that, but overall I did enjoy the book and I would highly recommend it. The next blue book that I read in the month of May is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is my 3rd read of Emily Henry's, and safe to say this is probably my favorite. Now I'm not sure if this is a controversial take, but I don't care. So I will explain why I love this book so much and why it is probably my favorite Emily Henry book to date. This is an emotional contemporary romance that follows Nora Stevens, who is an emotionally closed-off literary agent who goes on a very spur-of-the-moment month-long trip to a small town in an effort to reconnect with her pregnant little sister, and she eventually finds herself falling in love with this stone-cold editor named Charlie Lastra, who's sort of her rival back home in New York. And he happens to be at the small town because it's actually his hometown, so he's kind of home for the summer, and they end up flirting with one another and falling in love. In my opinion, the enemies to lovers trope in this book was done perfectly. The banter was exquisite. I found myself giggling just reading lines of dialogue between Charlie and Nora. I could have read them just making fun of one another like for the entire book, and that would have been enough for me. I enjoyed Nora's dynamic with her sister Libby. This isn't just a romance in my opinion, because there is a great deal of the book dedicated to their relationship as sisters, and I felt that was a really nice change of pace, because often romances, they solely focus on the romance, so much so that you don't really get to see the characters outside of their relationships with one another. And I felt that this did a good job of really humanizing Nora by getting the reader to see her dynamic with a different character, her sister. So yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I love reading about sibling relationships in general, so this was definitely very relatable to me, and yeah, it made me connect even more with Nora as a character. As per usual with Emily Henry, I really adored her writing style. It was a bit info dumpy at times, hence why I gave this book 4.5 stars, and I do wish, while I did say that the enemies to lovers relationship was done perfectly, their chemistry was there, I just felt that it could have waited longer. This book is like, I think 400 pages, and it only took them like 100 to start making out in public places. I don't mind that, I just wish it took them longer to get to that point of like just going at it in like a library or something. Yeah, I do wish we kind of held off on that, just let the tension simmer for a bit longer. It would have made everything worth it at the end. But that's just my opinion as a novice romance reader. Overall, I think this was a perfect balance of a character study of these two characters who are very clearly emotionally damaged, a tale of two emotionally damaged sisters, as well as just an overall really good contemporary romance that doesn't rely on a cringy third act. Finally, we get a romance book that doesn't have some sort of forced third act. In fact, this third act conflict is very much realistic for the pace of this book. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I think it's mature, it's realistic, it's raw, and is still an entertaining and fun romance novel. And the fact that it is Emily Henry's newest book, that really shows how much Emily Henry has grown as a writer. And I'm glad that I'm getting used to her writing style, and I'm also like loving her works more and more as she puts more out. So hoping that maybe Happy Place, which I'll be reading in September, gets a perfect 5 stars. We shall see. But yes, I highly recommend you check out this book if you're a fan of Emily Henry or just contemporary romance in general. On to the next one. The next blue book that I read in the month of May, switching back to poetry collections, is Preparatory School for the End of the World by Nat Raum. Told you we weren't done talking about them quite yet. This is a self-published poetry collection that explores a childhood plagued by religious and sexual trauma told non-linearly. I actually have the book with me. Once again, it was self-published, so I was able to purchase this from the author themselves on their website. And it's just a beautiful, stunning cover that, yeah, I had to own. But yes, I will put the link to purchase this in the description box because, yeah, spoiler alert, I love this book and it was actually my favorite read of the entire month. You're probably thinking to yourself, Natalie, why do you read these 400-page books and you give them such low ratings, and then you read like 30-page chapbook and you're like, give it 5 stars, why? And the answer is because it's perfect and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. This book is everything to me. The verse is exactly what I was looking for in the previous prose collection that we discussed. There is so much heart and soul poured into every piece of this collection, from the cover to the titles of each of the poems to the goddamn feel of this collection. Like, if you buy this, like, it is buttery smooth. I'm a sucker for poetry collections, what can I say? But this one especially. Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite poetry collections that I own, and it will definitely remain near and dear to me for a while. I don't want to give too much away as to like the story of this book because it's very abstract in its language, but it still really hits home. So yeah, don't want to give too much away. If you're into poetry, like, I think you'll really enjoy this. My favorite pieces from this collection were Greek Chorus, Born of Chaos, and Rosewood Lane. But to be honest, I loved all of the pieces in this book. So yeah, and it has like a little playlist at the beginning, like a music playlist, and you can like scan the QR code and listen to songs while you read the poems, and it just like, it goes perfectly. So yeah, I think that's a really unique premise. Check it out. Again, the link to verses will be in the description box. The next blue book that I read in the month of May is Dominant Genes by S.J. Sindu. I actually read a book by S.J. Sindu pretty much exactly a year ago for my other reading blue books in the month of May video, Blue Skinned Gods, and I really enjoyed that book, so I wanted to check out another one of S.J. Sindu's works, and luck will have it, it's also blue, so it'll be perfect for this video. And I actually have it here with me. It was sent to me by the publisher Black Lawrence Press. Again, support your indie presses. And yeah, it has a really nice cover and some nice blurbs on the back, but To summarize, this is a reflective hybrid collection about the intersection of family, queer identity, androgyny, and Sri Lankan Tamil heritage, told through a short chapbook of nonfiction, prose, and poetry. So hence why I called it a hybrid chapbook. As usual, S.J. Sindu's writing never disappoints. This collection had a perfect balance between innocent reflection on childhood experiences and angsty rage against familial and cultural expectations. I ate this up so quickly, probably because it's very short, but yeah, I can't wait to explore more of S.J. Sindu's work. Once again, this is a collection of it's mixed poetry and prose, so it's kind of got something for everyone. It's got humor, it's got wit, it has really poignant poetry and very informative essays. So yeah, if you're into any of that and if the premise intrigues you, I definitely highly recommend you check this out. My fave pieces from this book are Banana Tree Wedding and Mother. I gave it 4.25 stars and I can't wait to check out more of S.J. Sindu's works. On to the next one. The next blue book that I read in the month of May is This Winter by Alice Oseman. This is the last Alice Oseman book that I have not read, so I had to give it a go for this month. This is a heartwarming prequel to Alice Oseman's debut work Solitaire, and it follows the Spring siblings, so Charlie Spring, Tori Spring, and their little brother Oliver Spring. This is a super cute novella. It has some illustrations sprinkled throughout that still manages to gently explore Charlie's mental health, because during this time, this takes place during Christmas time, where Charlie has just gotten back from being institutionalized for his eating disorder. So yeah, it definitely explores that, as well as the Spring siblings dynamics, which we don't really get to see in Alice Oseman's other work, so that was definitely a very pleasant surprise. We get to see all three siblings' perspectives, though Oliver's at the end is kind of short and kind of just a throw-in, but it's fine. I like reading his perspective as well. And it also explores complex parental relationships between the Spring siblings and their parent in a very mature and honest way that only Alice Oseman can achieve. Leave it to Oseman to perfectly encapsulate what it means to be a teen, hence why they're my favorite author. And I can't wait for more of their works, and as well as the Heartstopper TV show. The season 2 is coming out this August, which I'm super excited for. But yeah, this was just a nice little read for this month. So yeah, if you're into Alice Oseman and you haven't checked out any of her novellas, I would highly recommend you check this one out. On to the next one. The next blue book that I read in the month of May is Small Beauty by Jia King Wilson Yang. Hope I'm pronouncing her name right. This is a reflective novella about a trans woman of a mixed Chinese-Canadian descent who is grappling with the grief of losing her beloved cousin, who was the last connection to her blood family. This is definitely a much heavier, so trigger warnings for death, homophobic, transphobic, hate crimes. The prose throughout this work, which I believe is a debut work, which is really impressive. It was divine, and it's seamlessly weaved in figurative language, complex characters, relatable dialogue, and motifs of geese and storms, which are random motifs, but they worked nonetheless. While I wish there wasn't so much time spent in the heads of characters such as Sandy and Diane, they're not the main characters, and I felt this would have been fine if we just stuck to May's perspective. If she is the main character and we should just stick to her head. I didn't really find any use in seeing the perspectives of Sandy and Diane. I felt it just took away from May's story. But yeah, that's just my opinion. In the end, I still found this to be a very thoughtful, mature character study that carefully discusses themes of race, identity, allyship, and grief. If you're looking for a little bit of a heavier read that's still quick to get through, I would highly recommend you check out this debut work. I gave it 4 stars. And I'm hoping that the author comes out with more works in the future. I believe this is their only work to date, but the author comes out with more works in the future because I really enjoyed their writing. But yeah, on to the next one. We're down to the last 2 blue books. Don't worry, everyone. And these blue books are actually ARCs, so thank you to NetGalley for providing me with these ARCs in exchange for honest reviews. The next blue book that I read in the month of May is The Newtown Librarian by Kathy Anderson. This is a feel-good slice of life story about a queer middle-aged librarian who gets a new job in a small town in New Jersey. The writing is simplistic, the cast of characters are very quirky and Italian, and the short chapters definitely made this a breeze to get through. I really enjoyed reading a more middle-aged queer perspective, as it's not something we get to read about. Also loved reading about the main character Nan's love for books, as well as her connecting with many of the townspeople, especially characters such as Joe, who is this orphan boy who makes his way into the library, and Jeremy, who is Nan's landlord's husband. There are a lot of characters in this book with, albeit very similar names because they're all goddamn Italian in this town, which isn't bad necessarily. It just made the reading process a little more confusing than it had to be. I also didn't love how this book was structured. Each short chapter, while it was easy to get through, I didn't like how Nan had a lot of issues to go through, but each issue was kind of handled chronologically. So a couple chapters would be spent dedicated to solving this problem, and then the next couple chapters would be dedicated to solving this problem, and then so on and so forth until the end. I felt it would have been more impactful and realistic if there were steps taken to solve each of these problems and they were kind of, you know, intertwined throughout all of the chapters instead of kind of handling them chronologically, which, I don't know, I guess that's one way to solve problems, like in real life, but in a book it would be more impactful, in my opinion, for the character to kind of go through an arc, kind of with all these problems meshed together, if that makes sense. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this book, but I wouldn't read it again, if that makes sense. I gave it 3.5 stars. If you're in a mood for a no plot, just vibes book about a queer, horny, 50-year-old hypochondriac librarian, then check this book out. If not, maybe skip this one. The last blue book that I read in the month of May is actually a very highly anticipated read that is also an arc by NetGalley, so thank you NetGalley, is Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo. Elizabeth Acevedo is a longtime favorite author of mine, and I was delighted to see that her new book is not only literary fiction and magical realism combined, but also blue, so perfect for this month's challenge. This is a dark, heartfelt exploration of family, sisterhood, womanhood, and a generational trauma. It follows this Dominican American family who, in the midst of their death-seer sister slash aunt slash mothers deciding to plan her own living wake, they must grapple with all of the events that have led them to this point. So it's very non-linear. It goes back and forth between timelines. Once again, this makes the book a bit hard to follow at times, as well as the switching of POVs. It not only follows the Death Seer's perspective, Flor, it also follows her sister, Camila, Mathilde, and Pastora. It also follows the younger generation of the family, her daughter, Ona, and Ona's cousin, Yadi. So 6 perspectives of this book, so quite a lot of perspective, but I felt they were balanced pretty evenly. Didn't get too confusing except when it came to Ona, because there is actually an added layer to the story in which this book has come about because Ona is researching her family's past, and this book is kind of compiled of each member of her family's narrations, as well as interviews between her and the family member in question. So she's sort of the narrator of this whole thing. So when it gets to her perspective, instead of it saying Ona, it says I. I'm explaining this to you because if you want to read this book, it does get a bit confusing when you don't recognize this pattern right away and you just see I and you're like, who's I? And then it's in like first person perspective in that chapter, and then the rest of the chapters are in third person perspective. So yeah, bit confusing with the POV switches. Again, I have a tiny brain and these authors need to accommodate for it. Dynamics between each character from sister to sister to mother to daughter was oh so realistic, making the ending that much more bittersweet. My only major qualm with the story, and the reason I gave it only 4.25 stars for such a highly anticipated read, is I wish there was more to this family's lore. I wish there was more magic. The magic system in this book is very subtle, not highlighted a whole bunch except for maybe Flor's power, which is being able to dream about people around her dying. That's pretty much the only major magical element of the story. The other sisters do have powers of their own, but they're kind of tamped down compared to Flor's power. So I would have loved to see more magic from these sisters. I felt it would have really enriched and enlightened this book even more, as well as I wish we got to see more of their ancestral history. There were footnotes made by Ona, who again is sort of the whole narrator of the story, about the family's like lineage and ancestral history and like the history of colonialism and the Dominican Republic, but it wasn't a major focus of this book, and I wish that was put more to the forefront and we got to see more of Ona's interviews and footnotes and more of that kind of frame narrative. I would have liked to see more is all. With that said, I really enjoyed this latest novel of Acevedo. It once again cemented for me why I'm such a long-time stan of her work. Yeah, if you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend you do. Comes out, I believe, the 1st of August of this year. So if you can't get an ARC, I definitely recommend pre-ordering it because it is a really lovely read. But yeah, guys, those are all of the blue books that I read in the month of May. We had a lot to get through, but I hoped I was able to summarize and talk about my thoughts sensibly in this video. Next month, I will be doing my last wrap-up for a couple of months, as I'm going to be going on vacation for a couple months this summer, but I will still try to get other types of videos out for you guys, like a possible book trailer for my debut poetry chapbook, Blue Pearl. available for purchase in the description box below. Love that seamless, shameless self-promo. But yeah, guys, overall, I hope you stick around for more book and artsy content. Comment down below what you read in the month of May. Like this video, share it with your friends, and yeah, I hope you have an amazing day, week, month, whatever you're feeling, and yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!